The unexpected dinner had been a long, grueling week for Sundar Pichai. As the CEO of Google, his days were often packed with meetings, strategy sessions, and press engagements. This week had been particularly taxing. Endless debates on artificial intelligence ethics, negotiations with international regulators, and a tense internal discussion about the future direction of Google Cloud. His mind was weary, and his body cried out for rest. Yet, despite it all, Sundar remained grounded. It was a principle he had learned from his humble beginnings in Chennai, India. No matter how high he climbed, he reminded himself that respect and empathy for others were far more valuable than titles or achievements. That Friday evening, with the sun dipping below the California horizon, Sundar decided to take a rare moment for himself. He canceled his usual post-work video calls and made an impromptu reservation at La Belle Vie, an exclusive new luxury restaurant in San Francisco. The establishment had become the talk of Silicon Valley, known for its exquisite tasting menus, celebrity clientele, and unparalleled ambiance. What most didn't know was that La Belle Vie was quietly owned by a consortium of investors led by none other than Sundar himself. It was a passion project of his, a way to support talented young chefs and hospitality workers, providing them a platform to showcase their skills. Though he rarely advertised his involvement, tonight felt like the perfect opportunity to experience it firsthand, as an ordinary guest. Sundar opted for discretion. Dressed in a simple navy blue blazer, a white shirt open at the collar, and well-worn jeans, he hoped to blend into the crowd. His glasses framed his calm eyes, and his demeanor was as unassuming as ever. He arrived alone without his usual security detail or personal assistant. As he entered the grand, softly lit dining room of La Belle Vie, he took a moment to appreciate the artistry of the space. Crystal chandeliers, elegantly set tables, and a warm buzz of conversation floating through the air. The maitre d' was busy attending to a VIP party near the entrance, so Sundar waited patiently to be noticed. After a few minutes, a young waiter named Damien approached him. Damien was new to the restaurant, ambitious and eager to impress, perhaps a little too eager. Unaware of Sundar's identity, he gave the newcomer a quick glance. Seeing the understated outfit and no hint of a reservation under an obvious VIP name, he immediately made a snap judgment. "Good evening," Damien said curtly, barely masking his impatience. "Do you have a reservation?" "Yes," Sundar replied calmly, giving his name. Damien typed it into the system, failing to connect the dots. No celebrity, no high-profile figure that he recognized. "Ah, okay. Right this way," he said, leading Sundar to a small corner table far from the center of the dining room. The table was cramped and near the kitchen entrance, a spot usually reserved for late walk-ins or guests deemed less important. Sundar, always gracious, said nothing. Moments later, as he perused the menu, Damien returned with an air of forced politeness. "Just so you know, sir, our menu might be a bit sophisticated. I hope it's not too overwhelming," he remarked with a faint smirk. Sundar looked up, puzzled but still composed. "I'm sure I'll manage," he replied softly. Damien nodded, rolling his eyes ever so slightly, then walked away. As the meal progressed, Sundar began to notice subtle nuances in the service. Water refills were delayed, while other tables were attentively cared for. Requests were met with brusque responses. When Sundar inquired about the chef's special, Damien responded, "It's probably not something you'd be familiar with, sir. Maybe stick with something simple." A nearby couple overheard the exchange, exchanging shocked glances. They recognized Sundar but chose to remain silent, unsure of how to intervene. Meanwhile, the restaurant's head chef, a young culinary prodigy named Sofia Martinez, noticed the commotion from the open kitchen. She squinted, trying to get a better look at the guest in the corner. When her sous chef whispered, "Isn't that Sundar Pichai?" her heart skipped a beat. She hurried out of the kitchen, intending to greet him personally. But as she approached, Damien blocked her path, oblivious. "Chef, this one's just a walk-in, probably not worth your time tonight," he said dismissively. Sophia's eyes widened. "Are you serious?" she whispered harshly. "That's the man who co-owns this restaurant." Damien turned pale, the blood draining from his face. But it was too late. Sundar had already witnessed enough. He folded his napkin gracefully, stood up, and walked toward the maitre d', who had finally noticed the situation. "Excuse me," Sundar said gently. "Could you please let Sophia know that I'd like to speak with her after dinner?" "Of course, Mr. Pichai," the maitre d' stammered, now fully aware of the mistake. Sundar returned to his table and calmly finished his meal, even thanking Damien politely when the dessert was served. Not once did he raise his voice or show anger. But the weight of his quiet dignity filled the room with an undeniable tension. By the time the check arrived, of course waived by the maitre d', Sundar left a generous tip. He then waited patiently for Sophia, who rushed to his table profusely apologetic. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Pichai," she began. "This is not how we operate. Please believe me." Sundar smiled warmly. "I know, Sophia. I came tonight to enjoy the food and the experience, and I did. But perhaps there's a lesson here." He glanced toward Damien, who stood trembling by the service station. Turning back to Sophia, he added, "Let's have a conversation tomorrow morning about training, values, and kindness." With that, Sundar walked out of La Belle Vie with the same unshakable grace he had entered with, leaving behind a room full of hushed voices and wide eyes. Little did anyone know, this quiet moment would soon spark a powerful wave of change within the restaurant and far beyond, the ripple effect of a quiet stand. The following morning, sunlight poured over the streets of San Francisco, painting the city in shades of gold and warmth. But inside La Belle Vie, the atmosphere was far from bright. Tension hung in the air like a thick fog. News of the previous evening's incident had spread rapidly among the staff. Sophia, the head chef, had barely slept. She arrived early, hoping to collect her thoughts and prepare for the conversation Sundar Pichai had requested. The young culinary prodigy had worked tirelessly to build the reputation of this restaurant, and the idea that such a public and shameful mistake had unfolded under her leadership gnawed at her conscience. Meanwhile, Damien had not returned home at all. He spent the night racked with guilt, pacing the small confines of his studio apartment. Only 6 months into his new job, he had been determined to prove himself in the city's competitive fine dining scene. Yet in his ambition and youthful arrogance, he had allowed judgment to cloud his behavior, leading to an unforgivable lapse in professionalism and respect. Now he faced the terrifying prospect of a conversation with a man who not only commanded global respect but also held ownership over the very place he worked. By 9 a.m., both Sophia and Damien were seated nervously in the restaurant's private conference room. Sundar arrived promptly at 9:30, his presence unassuming yet commanding. He entered with a gentle smile and a simple greeting, immediately dispelling some of the tension in the room. "Good morning, Sophia." "Good morning, Damien," he said softly, taking a seat across from them. He placed a leather-bound notebook on the table but left it closed, signaling that this was not going to be a corporate interrogation, but a sincere conversation. After a pause, he looked at Damien, whose eyes remained fixed on the floor. "Damien," Sundar began, his tone even and compassionate, "I want you to understand something very important. What happened last night was not about me being insulted. I've experienced far worse in life, and I have no ego in this. The problem is deeper. It's about the culture we build and the assumptions we allow ourselves to make about others." Damien's throat tightened. He struggled to speak, but Sundar continued, his voice calm but firm. "When I was a boy growing up in Chennai, my family didn't have much. There were times when I couldn't afford to eat at restaurants, let alone one as beautiful as this. But my parents taught me that the value of a person is never tied to their clothes, their wealth, or their status. It is tied to their heart, their actions, and how they treat others, especially those they believe owe them nothing in return." At this, Sophia leaned forward, her eyes brimming with empathy. She had long admired Sundar not just as a business leader, but as a human being whose humility was legendary. Damien finally raised his gaze, his voice trembling. I know I was wrong, Mr. Pichai. I can't tell you how ashamed I am. I judged you the moment you walked in. I let my assumptions control my actions, and I treated you in a way no guest, no person should be treated. Sundar nodded gently. I believe you understand your mistake, Damien. The easy path would be to fire you today. But I don't believe in the easy path when it comes to growth. Instead, I'd like to propose something. Else, both Sophia and Damien looked at him surprised. I want this restaurant to be a place where kindness is as fundamental as culinary excellence, where every guest is treated with dignity, whether they walk in wearing a $1,000 suit or a simple t-shirt. So here is my offer. Damien, if you are willing, I would like you to participate in a new training program we will implement, one focused on empathy, respect, and the values that should guide our service. Damien blinked, overcome with emotion. He had fully expected to be fired, humiliated, and cast out of the profession he loved. Now he was being offered something unexpected, a chance to learn, to redeem himself. Yes, Mr. Pichai. I would be honored, he managed to say, his voice cracking. Sundar smiled warmly. Good. And Sophia, I trust you to help lead this initiative. I want this restaurant to be a beacon of how excellence in service includes the excellence of the heart. Sophia's eyes lit up with determination. Absolutely, Mr. Pichai. I'll design a comprehensive program, and we'll start today. With that, the meeting concluded. Sundar rose and shook Damien's hand firmly, offering him a look of genuine encouragement. The young waiter left the room with a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that the real work lay ahead. Over the following weeks, La Belle Vie underwent a quiet transformation. Sophia collaborated with Sundar to create a program that blended professional hospitality training with lessons on empathy, humility, and cultural awareness. They brought in guest speakers, philanthropists, community leaders, and even formerly homeless individuals, to share their perspectives on dignity and respect. Staff engaged in role-playing exercises designed to challenge their biases and foster compassion. Damien, in particular, threw himself into the training with dedication. He volunteered for every session, asked questions, and sought feedback. Gradually, his demeanor changed. The arrogance that had once marred his interactions gave way to genuine warmth and curiosity about the people he served. Word of the initiative began to spread throughout San Francisco's hospitality community. Other restaurant owners reached out, eager to learn about the program. Sophia and Sundar began considering ways to scale it across their broader network of restaurants. Then, one evening, just over a month after the incident, a quiet man in a wheelchair arrived at La Belle Vie. His clothes were worn, his face weathered by time and hardship. He had been gifted a meal voucher through a local charity supported by the restaurant. The staff, now fully trained in the new approach, welcomed him with the same grace and enthusiasm reserved for any celebrity. Damien personally attended to the man's table. With kindness and dignity, he explained the menu, offered recommendations, and engaged the guest in heartfelt conversation. The man's eyes shimmered with gratitude. When the meal concluded, he took Damien's hand and whispered, "You made me feel like a king tonight. Thank you." Across the room, Sophia and Sundar observed the scene, their hearts swelling with quiet pride. It was a small moment, but it reflected a profound shift, not just in one waiter's behavior, but in the soul of the restaurant itself. Later that evening, after the last guests had departed, Sundar addressed the entire staff. "This is why we do this work," he said. "Not just to serve beautiful food, but to serve with beautiful hearts. Remember this always." The staff erupted in applause, their spirits uplifted by the journey they had undertaken together. But unbeknownst to them, the story of Sundar's visit and the transformation of La Belle Vie was about to reach an even wider audience, thanks to an unexpected source. The power of a story. Shared 2 weeks after the quiet transformation at La Belle Vie, something unexpected happened that would send ripples far beyond the elegant walls of the restaurant. It all began with a young journalist named Hannah Wu, a well-respected writer for the San Francisco Chronicle. Hannah had been tipped off about a new movement within the local restaurant industry. a growing interest in hospitality training programs that emphasized empathy and respect alongside culinary excellence. Intrigued, she decided to investigate. Her research quickly led her to Sofia Martinez and her pioneering program at La Belle Vie. After securing an interview, Hannah visited the restaurant one crisp afternoon, prepared to write a simple feature on the training. What she didn't expect was to uncover a deeper, more profound story rooted in kindness and transformation. Sitting across from Sofia in the sun-drenched corner of the restaurant's lounge, Hannah listened intently as the chef recounted the events that had unfolded just weeks earlier. Sofia described how a new waiter had unknowingly insulted Sundar Pichai himself, and how instead of responding with anger or retribution, Sundar had chosen to turn the moment into a powerful learning opportunity for the entire team. The story resonated deeply with Hannah. As a journalist who often covered technology and culture, she had followed Sundar Pichai's career for years, admiring his rise from modest beginnings to global leadership. But here was a side of him the world rarely saw, a man who used his influence not to dominate or control, but to elevate and inspire others. With Sofia's blessing, and after obtaining careful permission from Sundar through his office, Hannah crafted her article with meticulous care. She focused not on the sensationalism of the incident, but on the values that had emerged from it: humility, second chances, and the enduring belief in the potential for people to grow. The article, titled "A Lesson in Grace: How Google's CEO Changed a Luxury Restaurant with One Simple Act," was published on the Chronicle's front page the following Sunday. Within hours, it went viral. Social media platforms lit up with shares, retweets, and comments from readers moved by the narrative. Business leaders, hospitality professionals, educators, and everyday readers alike were captivated by the notion that even the most powerful among us could choose compassion over condemnation. At Google's Mountain View headquarters, Sundar read the article with a quiet smile. He hadn't sought publicity for what had transpired at La Belle Vie. In fact, he had hoped it would remain a private learning experience. But as the story spread, he began to see its potential to spark a broader conversation about leadership and values in the corporate world. That Monday morning, during a town hall meeting with senior Google executives, Sundar referenced the article and used it to illustrate a core principle he believed every leader should embody. Leadership is not about asserting power, he told the gathered team. It's about empowering others to rise. If we can carry that spirit into everything we do, whether we're building products, serving users, or interacting with one another, we will create a culture that truly matters. Meanwhile, at La Belle Vie, the influx of attention was both exhilarating and overwhelming. Reservations skyrocketed as people flocked to experience the restaurant where the now famous transformation had taken place. Sofia and her staff welcomed the surge of interest, but they remained steadfast in their commitment to the values that had driven their growth. For Damien, the young waiter whose fateful misjudgment had sparked it all, the public attention was both humbling and deeply motivating. Initially hesitant to face the media, he soon realized that sharing his personal journey of growth could inspire others in similar positions. With Sofia's encouragement, Damien agreed to be interviewed by a local podcast focused on stories of redemption and personal transformation. In a heartfelt conversation, he spoke candidly about his mistakes, his initial shame, and the profound impact of Sundar's approach. "I was given a second chance," he said, voice steady. "And I learned that true excellence in service isn't just about precision or polish. It's about seeing the humanity in every person you encounter. That's a lesson I will carry with me for the rest of my life." The podcast episode quickly gained traction, drawing messages of support and gratitude from listeners around the world. Other restaurant owners reached out to Damien, asking for advice on fostering similar cultures of respect within their teams. Encouraged, Sofia and Damien began hosting informal workshops for fellow hospitality professionals, sharing their experiences and the framework of their training program. One afternoon, as they were preparing for a particularly large workshop, Sofia received an unexpected call from Sundar's office. Sundar himself wanted to meet with her and Damien again, this time at Google's headquarters. The request both thrilled and unnerved them. They had admired Sundar's humility and kindness from afar. But the idea of presenting their work to one of the world's most influential CEOs was daunting. Nevertheless, they accepted, determined to honor the opportunity. When the day of the visit arrived, Sophia and Damien were greeted warmly at the Google campus. Sundar welcomed them into a spacious yet inviting conference room, where he listened attentively as they shared the evolution of their program and its impact on the broader community. Sundar's eyes twinkled with genuine interest. "You've done something remarkable," he said. "You've turned a difficult moment into a movement, and I believe this is only the beginning." He went on to propose a bold idea. Google's own hospitality services, including its global network of cafeterias, event spaces, and partner venues, could benefit immensely from the values-driven training Sophia and Damien had pioneered. Sundar invited them to collaborate with Google's learning and development teams to adapt their program for this broader context. The offer left Sophia and Damien both exhilarated and humbled. They knew the road ahead would be challenging, but they were inspired by the opportunity to scale their message of empathy and respect on a global stage. As they left the campus that afternoon, walking beneath the sun-dappled trees of the Googleplex, Sophia turned to Damien. "Can you believe where this started?" she asked softly. Damien shook his head, a smile spreading across his face. "One mistake, and one incredible act of kindness," he replied. They both knew that their journey was far from over. The real work, the deeper impact was still to come. And back at La Belle Vie, as the sun set over the city once more, the restaurant buzzed with life. Guests from all walks of life filled its tables, celebrities, business leaders, artists, and ordinary citizens alike, each greeted with the same warmth and dignity. The spirit of compassion that had taken root there now radiated outward, carried forward by every member of the team. At the heart of it all remained a simple truth, one that Sundar Pichai had lived by and shared through his quiet example. The power of kindness is limitless when we choose to lead with empathy. The expansion of a philosophy as the weeks turned into months. What had begun as an isolated incident at La Belle Vie evolved into something far greater, a quiet movement rooted in the philosophy of empathy and humility, subtly reshaping not only the restaurant but also the wider hospitality industry and beyond. News outlets around the country continued to pick up the story, each article weaving a narrative of leadership through compassion. More importantly, other restaurant owners and corporate leaders began to ask a simple yet powerful question. What if this approach could work for us too? At Google's Mountain View campus, the partnership between Sophia, Damien, and Google's learning and development teams was thriving. The program, now titled the Empathy and Service Initiative, was being piloted across several of Google's internal hospitality operations, from the sprawling campus cafes to their luxury event spaces used for client gatherings and conferences. Sundar, deeply invested in the project, ensured it received the resources and attention it deserved. He frequently reminded his teams in both public addresses and smaller private conversations that the success of Google's mission was fundamentally tied to the humanity with which they served both their users and their colleagues. Meanwhile, back at La Belle Vie, the changes continued to ripple through the daily life of the restaurant. The staff training program, once an informal set of workshops, had evolved into a formal curriculum with modules that covered not just service etiquette, but also storytelling, cultural sensitivity, and techniques for fostering genuine human connection. The restaurant's hiring practices began to emphasize not only experience and technical skill, but also qualities such as empathy, resilience, and emotional intelligence. New hires were paired with seasoned mentors who had fully embraced the philosophy of kindness-driven service. Damien, once an insecure young waiter who had made a public mistake, had become one of the program's most passionate advocates. His transformation inspired his peers, and he found a new sense of purpose in helping others cultivate the same understanding that had changed his life. He regularly spoke at industry conferences and mentorship events, candidly sharing his journey and urging others to look beyond superficial judgments in every aspect of service. Under Sophia's leadership, La Belle Vie had quietly become a beacon in the fine dining world. a place where the art of cuisine was matched by the art of human connection. The waitstaff were not just servers but storytellers, ambassadors of kindness. Regular patrons began to notice the difference. One evening, a well-known Silicon Valley venture capitalist brought a group of international investors to dine at La Belle Vie. Accustomed to the polished but impersonal treatment of most high-end establishments, they were visibly moved by the warmth and attentiveness they received. "I've dined in Michelin-starred restaurants all over the world," one of the guests remarked, "but I've never felt this seen, this valued as a human being." Word spread quickly in influential circles. Soon, other restaurants began to send their managers and staff to observe the program at La Belle Vie. Sophia and Damien opened their doors willingly, holding monthly workshops and sharing materials freely. They believed that the philosophy of empathy and service was not a competitive edge to be guarded, but a universal value to be shared. Sundar continued to support their efforts behind the scenes, offering quiet guidance and occasionally participating in key discussions. Then came an unexpected invitation, one that would take their message to an entirely new audience. The World Hospitality Forum, an annual gathering of global leaders in the restaurant, hotel, and travel industries, extended an offer for Sophia and Damien to deliver a keynote presentation on the Empathy and Service Initiative. The conference, held in Geneva, attracted thousands of attendees from across the globe: chefs, hotel executives, designers, and cultural influencers. Sophia and Damien were both honored and daunted. The opportunity to share their work on such a prestigious stage was thrilling, but it also came with immense responsibility. They prepared meticulously. With Sundar's encouragement, they crafted a presentation that combined personal storytelling with practical insights. They shared the original incident, Damien's mistake, Sundar's response, not as a tale of shame, but as a testament to the power of growth and forgiveness. They outlined the training framework they had developed and provided tangible tools that attendees could adapt for their own organizations. When the day of the keynote arrived, the conference hall was packed. Sophia and Damien stood together on the grand stage beneath a banner that read, "Redefining Excellence Through Empathy." Sophia began by telling the story of La Belle Vie, its rise, and the pivotal evening that had changed its course. Then Damien took the microphone, his voice steady but filled with emotion, and spoke from the heart about his personal transformation. He described the fear he had felt in the aftermath of his mistake, the unexpected grace he had received, and the profound responsibility that came with a second chance. "There is immense power in how we treat one another," Damien said, looking out over the sea of faces. "Every interaction is an opportunity to build someone up or to diminish them. I was fortunate to encounter a leader who chose to build me up. I hope that by sharing this, we can all choose to lead with that same spirit." The audience responded with a standing ovation. After the keynote, Sophia and Damien were approached by dozens of attendees, each eager to learn more and bring similar practices to their own organizations. Back in San Francisco, the team at La Belle Vie followed the conference through live streams and news coverage, cheering as their colleagues carried their shared philosophy onto the world stage. In the days that followed, the impact of the presentation became clear. Hospitality leaders from as far away as Tokyo and Dubai reached out to collaborate. Industry publications featured in-depth profiles on the Empathy and Service Initiative. Sophia and Damien began receiving invitations to consult for major hotel chains and airlines. Most meaningfully, letters and emails poured in from hospitality workers around the world, waiters, bartenders, concierges, who had been inspired by the story and were eager to bring more humanity into their daily work. All this growth and attention, Sundar remained as humble and supportive as ever. He met privately with Sophia and Damien one quiet afternoon at La Belle Vie, away from the spotlight. "You've created something beautiful," he told them, his voice filled with genuine pride. "But remember, this isn't about programs or conferences. It's about how we live these values every single day in every interaction. That's where the real impact lies." Sophia and Damien nodded, deeply moved. They understood that while the world might celebrate the outward success, of their work. The true heart of the movement remained simple and personal, a commitment to seeing the humanity in everyone they served. As the sun set once more over San Francisco, casting long golden shadows across the city, La Belle Vie buzzed with life. New guests continued to arrive, drawn not just by the cuisine but by the spirit of warmth and dignity that infused every corner of the restaurant. In a quiet moment between seatings, Damien stood by the entrance, watching as a young couple was welcomed with genuine smiles. He thought back to that fateful night months ago, when he had allowed judgment to cloud his service. Now every day was an opportunity to honor the lesson he had learned, and to pay forward the kindness that had changed his life. Little did he know even greater opportunities to spread this message of empathy and respect were just around the corner. A global movement begins months past, but the waves created by Sundar Pichai's quiet act of compassion at La Belle Vie only grew stronger. What began as an internal shift within a single restaurant had spread outward like ripples in a still pond, touching corners of the world that none of the original participants could have anticipated. Across industries, conversations about empathy, leadership, and the human experience within service roles were taking root in meaningful ways. Conferences, workshops, and industry publications buzzed with new interest in what came to be affectionately known as the La Belle Vie approach. Yet for Sundar, Sophia, and Damien, the success of the movement was not measured in accolades or attention, but in the small, everyday moments where dignity and kindness could be extended. Moments often invisible to the public but transformative in their impact. At Google, the Empathy and Service Initiative had been formally adopted across their global campuses. Employees who worked in cafeterias, reception, security, and event services underwent the training not as a mandatory corporate checkbox, but as a genuine opportunity to enrich both their personal and professional lives. Sundar often referenced the program during leadership talks, emphasizing that whether one worked on advanced AI or served coffee to colleagues, the manner in which they treated others was a reflection of Google's core values. Feedback from the hospitality teams was overwhelmingly positive. Many employees shared that the training had given them not only practical tools for interacting with guests, but also a renewed sense of purpose in their work. They spoke of feeling more connected to their colleagues and more empowered to create moments of authentic kindness throughout the day. Meanwhile, La Belle Vie continued to flourish. The restaurant had become more than just a destination for fine dining. It had evolved into a symbol of what hospitality could achieve when guided by empathy. Sophia remained grounded amid the acclaim, frequently reminding her team that the true measure of their work was not the media praise or the packed reservation lists, but the quiet satisfaction of knowing they had touched lives with sincerity and care. Damien, too, had matured into a deeply reflective and respected leader within the team. He had taken on the role of mentor, guiding new staff members not just in the technical aspects of service but in the underlying philosophy that now defined the restaurant's identity. One crisp autumn morning, an unexpected email arrived in Sophia's inbox. It was from the World Economic Forum, inviting her and Damien to participate in a special panel on the future of human-centered leadership. The panel would bring together leaders from various sectors: technology, healthcare, education, and hospitality, to explore how empathy could drive innovation and well-being in the modern workplace. The invitation came with a personal note from the forum's director. "Your story has inspired us deeply. We believe your voice is essential in this global conversation." Excited but humbled, Sophia forwarded the email to Sundar. His reply was brief but encouraging. "Go. Speak from the heart. The world needs more leaders like you and Damien." Preparations began in earnest. Sophia and Damien collaborated closely, crafting a presentation that balanced the emotional resonance of their journey with actionable insights for a global audience. They wanted to ensure that their message would resonate, not only with hospitality leaders but with executives and policymakers from all industries. When the day of the panel arrived in Davos, Switzerland, Sophia and Damien found themselves in the company of some of the most influential figures in the world. CEOs of Fortune 100 companies, heads of state, renowned academics, and cultural icons filled the conference halls. The scale of the event was daunting, but Sophia reminded Damien of their core principle: authenticity mattered more than polish. On stage, they told their story with unvarnished honesty. They spoke of Damien's mistake, Sundar's unexpected response, and the deliberate effort to build a culture where empathy was not an afterthought, but a foundational value. They shared concrete examples of how small acts of kindness had transformed their workplace and their own personal journeys. As they spoke, the audience leaned in. For all the talk of disruption and innovation that often filled the halls of Davos, here was a narrative that cut through to something timeless and universal: the profound human need to be seen, valued, and treated with dignity. During the Q&A session, an unexpected voice rose from the crowd. It was the CEO of a global airline, a man known for his strategic acumen but not necessarily for warmth. He asked, "How do you maintain this culture when the pressures of profitability and efficiency seem to push us in the opposite direction?" Damien responded with quiet conviction, "It starts with leadership. When leaders prioritize empathy, it cascades through the organization. It's not about choosing between kindness and success. It's about understanding that one strengthens the other." The room erupted in applause. After the panel, Sophia and Damien were inundated with requests for collaboration. Airlines, hotel chains, healthcare systems, even tech companies sought their guidance on embedding empathy into their cultures. It became clear that the appetite for this message was vast and growing. Back home in San Francisco, the team at Bellevue watched the live stream of the panel with pride. Sundar, in a rare break from his packed schedule, invited the entire restaurant team to Google's local event space for a private screening and celebration. When Sophia and Damien returned, they were greeted with cheers and heartfelt embraces. Sundar spoke briefly, his words as understated as ever but rich with meaning. "You've done something extraordinary," he told them. "But remember, this movement is not about the big stages or the headlines. It's about the millions of small moments that happen every day, in every corner of the world. That is where real change lives." The following months saw an explosion of activity. Sophia and Damien established a non-profit organization, the Empathy and Service Foundation, dedicated to providing training and resources to businesses of all sizes. With Sundar's backing and support from partners across industries, the foundation launched pilot programs in schools, hospitals, and underserved communities. Their vision was expansive: to cultivate a culture where empathy was not confined to luxury settings but was accessible and actionable everywhere. Meanwhile, La Bellevue remained a living laboratory for the philosophy they championed. The restaurant continued to host monthly empathy dinners, inviting guests from diverse backgrounds, including those experiencing homelessness, refugees, and frontline workers, to dine with dignity and connection. These evenings were deeply moving, often ending with tears of gratitude and shared understanding. For Damien, each dinner reinforced the lesson he had learned on that pivotal night so many months ago, that the smallest gestures of kindness could echo in ways one might never fully comprehend. As the year drew to a close, Sophia and Damien received one final surprise: an invitation from the United Nations to speak at the International Day of Human Dignity, a testament to how far their message had traveled. Standing on the global stage, they reflected on the incredible journey that had unfolded from a single moment of misjudgment and a single act of grace. They spoke not as perfect exemplars but as imperfect people, striving each day to honor the values they now held dear. And in the audience, watching with quiet pride, was Sundar Pichai, the man who had seen the potential for good in a moment of conflict, and who had chosen to lead with empathy when it mattered most. The legacy of one choice. As the new year unfolded, the impact of Sundar Pichai's single act of kindness at La Bellevue had grown into something far greater than any of those involved could have envisioned. What had begun as a quiet gesture, an opportunity to guide rather than punish, had blossomed into a global conversation about empathy, leadership, and the moral fabric that binds human interactions, whether in business, hospitality, or everyday life. Yet for Sundar, Sophia, Damien, and the team at La Belle Vie, the growing spotlight was never the true goal. They understood that the real legacy of this journey would not be measured in headlines or speaking engagements, but in the unseen moments that played out in workplaces, classrooms, hospitals, and homes around the world. Moments where individuals chose kindness, understanding, and patience over judgment, frustration, or indifference. Back at La Belle Vie, the restaurant continued to thrive, not merely as a destination for fine dining, but as a living embodiment of the values it now stood for. Guests arrived not only for the culinary experience but to witness firsthand a culture of genuine human connection. The restaurant's monthly empathy dinners had become a cherished tradition, attracting participants from all walks of life. One particularly poignant evening, Damien found himself serving a table of formerly homeless individuals now rebuilding their lives through a local nonprofit partnership. One elderly man, his weathered face illuminated by candlelight, clasped Damien's hand as he was served dessert and whispered, "No one has looked at me with this kind of respect in years. Thank you." For Damien, moments like these were the truest rewards, more meaningful than any award or article. Meanwhile, the Empathy and Service Foundation had expanded rapidly under Sophia and Damien's leadership. With Sundar's mentorship and the support of a growing network of partners, the foundation had launched programs in over 20 countries. From bustling five-star hotels in Tokyo to small family-run restaurants in rural Italy, and from elite corporate campuses in New York to public hospitals in Johannesburg, the training modules developed by Sophia and her team were being adapted and embraced. Their universal message, that empathy was not an abstract ideal but a tangible, actionable force that could transform relationships and outcomes, resonated across cultures and industries. The Foundation's online portal, launched to democratize access to the training materials, had attracted millions of downloads and thousands of testimonials poured in from individuals whose lives and workplaces had been touched. In one particularly moving letter, a nurse from a war-torn region wrote, "Your program reminded me that even in the darkest circumstances, I can choose to see the humanity in my patients and colleagues. You've helped me hold on to hope." These messages, often read aloud during Foundation meetings, served as a constant reminder to Sophia, Damien, and their growing team that their work was about real people, real lives, and real change. For Sundar, watching this movement evolve was both humbling and reaffirming. Despite his immense responsibilities at Google, he remained deeply connected to the Foundation's mission, often engaging in strategic discussions and providing quiet encouragement. In one intimate conversation with Sophia and Damien, he reflected on the origins of it all. "It's extraordinary to see how one moment of choice can echo so far," he said softly. "But remember, the true challenge is to sustain this spirit, especially as the world grows more complex and divided. We must ensure that empathy is not just a program, but a way of being." In response, Sophia pledged that the Foundation would continue to prioritize authenticity over expansion. "We will never lose sight of why we began," she assured him. And they didn't. As the movement matured, the Foundation invested in research to measure the long-term impacts of empathy-driven leadership and service. Collaborations with academic institutions yielded promising results, showing that organizations that embraced these values experienced not only higher employee satisfaction and customer loyalty, but also greater resilience and adaptability in times of crisis. Indeed, as unforeseen global challenges emerged, from economic disruptions to public health emergencies, the empathy-centered cultures fostered by the Foundation's programs proved to be vital anchors. Businesses reported that their teams remained more cohesive and compassionate under pressure, and that their leaders were better equipped to navigate uncertainty with grace and humanity. Through it all, Damien's personal journey remained a touchstone for the movement. His story continued to inspire countless individuals facing their own moments of reckoning. In speaking engagements, he would often say, "I am living proof that a second chance, offered with kindness, can change a life, and each of us has the power to offer that to someone else." His humility and sincerity resonated deeply, reminding audiences that empathy begins not with grand gestures, but with the everyday choices we make in how we treat one another. Years later, at a special anniversary celebration at La Belle Vie, Sundar, Sophia, Damien, and the entire team gathered to reflect on the extraordinary journey that had unfolded. The restaurant was filled with familiar faces, partners, guests, and friends who had supported and been transformed by the movement. During the evening, Sundar addressed the group with characteristic humility. "We often speak of innovation as the engine of progress," he said. "But tonight let us remember that the greatest innovation we can bring to the world is the simple, timeless act of caring for one another. This restaurant, this foundation, and each of you here have shown that empathy is not a weakness, but a profound strength. And in a world that often forgets this truth, your example shines brightly." The room rose in a standing ovation, not just for Sundar, but for the shared spirit that had brought them together. As the evening unfolded with laughter, shared stories, and deep gratitude, Sophia and Damien found a quiet moment to reflect. Looking out at the joyful gathering, Damien turned to Sophia and said, "You know, I sometimes wonder what would have happened if Sundar had chosen differently that night." Sophia smiled, her eyes shining. "He chose the path of empathy, and because of that choice, countless lives have been touched. It's a reminder to all of us that every choice matters, and so the story that began with one mistake and one act of grace continued to ripple outward, shaping a better world, one interaction at a time. From the elegant dining rooms of San Francisco to the bustling streets of distant cities, the legacy of La Belle Vie and the Empathy and Service Foundation lived on, a testament to the enduring power of kindness, the transformative potential of second chances, and the profound truth that the smallest acts of empathy can indeed change the world. Planting seeds of change. Everywhere years had now passed since that single unforgettable evening at La Belle Vie when a young waiter had unknowingly insulted Sundar Pichai and in doing so, triggered a chain of events no one could have predicted. What had started as a personal mistake met with an act of kindness had evolved into a global movement for empathy-driven leadership and service. Across industries and borders, from luxury dining to everyday workplaces, from corporate boardrooms to classrooms, people were awakening to the idea that empathy was not an abstract value, but a force that could shape behavior, culture, and ultimately, the quality of life itself. And though the original incident had long since faded from headlines, its spirit was more alive than ever. At La Belle Vie, the foundation of that culture remained as strong as the first day Sundar had gently shown Damien a better path. The restaurant, now more revered than ever, had become something of a pilgrimage site for leaders seeking inspiration. Sophia continued to balance her love of culinary art with her dedication to the Empathy and Service Foundation, ensuring that every new staff member was immersed not only in the techniques of world-class hospitality, but in the deeper philosophy of seeing and valuing every guest as a human being first. Damien, now a seasoned mentor and speaker on global stages, had grown into a figure whose journey resonated deeply with people across all walks of life. His story, a young man who had erred but had been met with grace and who had in turn dedicated his life to helping others embrace compassion, was more relevant than ever in a world increasingly divided by misunderstanding and impatience. Beyond the restaurant, the foundation had achieved extraordinary reach. Thousands of businesses, from hotels to airlines, from healthcare providers to educational institutions, had implemented some version of the empathy training originally developed at La Belle Vie. In cities across Europe, in remote villages, in Africa, in gleaming skyscrapers in Asia, leaders were finding that by fostering a culture where empathy was modeled from the top and practiced at every level, both human well-being and organizational success flourished. One of the most powerful examples came from an unexpected source. A global logistics company, known more for efficiency than warmth, had quietly partnered with the foundation to implement empathy training among its frontline staff, delivery, drivers, warehouse workers, and call center agents. The results astonished even the most skeptical executives. Employee engagement scores soared, turnover decreased, and customers consistently reported a noticeable difference in the kindness and attentiveness they experienced. At the heart of this new wave of corporate interest stood Sundar Pichai. While he remained a private figure, his quiet influence shaped countless boardroom conversations. His public remarks often wove in lessons drawn from the La Belle Vie story, that leadership begins not with strategy but with character, that innovation should serve humanity, and that the simplest act of seeing and respecting another person could be the spark for lasting transformation. In an interview with a prominent global media outlet, Sundar was once asked whether he saw empathy as a business strategy or a personal value. He replied, "It's both. But more than that, it's a way of living. Business, at its best, is about relationships. And relationships are built on trust, respect, and care. If we lose sight of that, we lose the very soul of what we do." The foundation continued to evolve. New partnerships were formed with academic institutions to study the long-term impacts of empathy in the workplace and society. Young leaders from diverse backgrounds were given fellowships to carry the message into their own communities. Sophia and Damien traveled extensively, speaking to groups as varied as tech entrepreneurs, high school students, healthcare professionals, and government leaders. Each time they shared the same core truth: that empathy was not an indulgence but a discipline, one that required awareness, humility, and daily practice. One of the most moving moments came during a conference in Nairobi, where Sophia and Damien met a young teacher who had used the Foundation's materials to transform her classroom. She described how her students, many of whom came from difficult backgrounds, had learned to listen to one another with curiosity instead of judgment, to help rather than compete, to resolve conflicts through understanding rather than anger. "You gave us a language for kindness," she told them, "and it's changing the way these children see themselves and each other." Back in San Francisco, La Belle Vie remained a grounding force for everyone involved. It was a living reminder of where it had all begun, a place where the spirit of humility, growth, and grace permeated every interaction. Sundar, whenever his schedule allowed, would visit quietly, not as an owner, but as a guest and fellow traveler on the path of empathy. One particular evening, during a private dinner with Sophia, Damien, and a few Foundation leaders, he reflected on the extraordinary journey they had all shared. "We often think of progress in terms of technology or economic growth," Sundar said, his voice gentle but clear. "But real progress is measured in how we treat each other. It's in the courage to pause, to listen, to offer a second chance. That's the kind of progress that will define the future of this world." The room fell silent, the weight of his words settling over them. They all understood, perhaps more deeply than ever, that their work was not about accolades or expansion, but about planting seeds of change. One conversation, one interaction, one choice at a time. As the dinner ended and the group lingered, in warm conversation, Damien found himself gazing out at the city lights. He thought back to the young, brash waiter he had been on that long-ago night, and to the man he had become because someone had chosen to see beyond his mistake and offer him a path to redemption. The journey had not been easy, nor would it ever truly be complete. But that was the beauty of it. Empathy was not a destination. It was a practice, a lifelong commitment to honoring the dignity of every human being. And so, as the lights of San Francisco twinkled in the distance and laughter echoed softly through the walls of La Belle Vie, a story that had begun with a single misjudgment and a single act of grace continued to unfold, not as an ending, but as an ever-growing testament to the power of kindness to change the world one heart at a time.